I'm alive. I shouldn't be.
He should not be alive. This is unfucking believable.
From the heart of trucker America, my boy Reed Coverdale, host of The Naturalist Capitalist.
This is what government does. It sucks.
If you think you're going to win people over by stating commonplaces, you're just selling the other part.
It is about dictating every transaction that you have for the rest of your life.
Mr. Potato Head.
Coverdale is the guy to be president of the United States.
You intimidated me with your perfect 74 stash.
That was the beginning of my problems.
A guy doing what he loved, chasing a minor.
Well, I'll put a 50 cal attached to my Suburban.
Libertarians need to get out of New York.
The gulag is going to be in your house.
This guy's a fucking murderer. He deserves to be in a
Gotta get him out of that truck at night and get him into the White House.
Hey guys, thank you for tuning in to another episode of The Naturalist Capitalist. It's been a busy week, been putting out like 2 episodes a day. Doesn't usually happen, but that's great. I'll take the traffic while I'm not working, which is starting pretty soon. Today, I've got a guy on that I've known about for probably 2 years now, and we actually ended up crossing paths in Vegas at Freedom Fest. And we might have actually been in the same room before in New Hampshire during the Tulsi Gabbard campaign. I'm not sure. I don't really know. We'll probably get into that. But he is the co-host of the Convo Couch, and he hosts the morning wake-up show. He is Pasta Jordula. How you doing this morning, man? Or this afternoon. I was not morning.
I'm doing good, Reed, thank you so much for having me on, man. It's a pleasure.
Yeah. So let's start with what I was saying there. I know you were a Tulsi supporter. Were you out in New Hampshire at all? And
yeah. I think we were in the same room back then. So I think we were just small names. We weren't Reed, Coverdale, and Pasta like we are now.
Oh yeah, the huge firebrands that we are now. Yeah.
I got security at the door, making sure that people don't come in while we're doing the show. That's
yeah, important stuff going on here. Yeah, that campaign was interesting because it wasn't very ideological. It was kind of centered around foreign policy, and you had communists, conservatives, libertarians, anarchists, Republicans, Democrats, Trump people, some like Bernie people, even like some former Hillary people, all joined together. I've never seen anything like that before, and I haven't seen it since, frankly. Like everything I've been involved with since then has been pretty ideologically aligned. But was that remarkable to you too, to see that? Had you seen that type of thing before, or was that kind of special in your eyes too?
It was kind of special in my eyes, since it really was. It was just a great mixture of people. So and Tulsi in New Hampshire was just awesome, right? You get to meet all these people coming in from New York, coming in from Massachusetts, people that live there, and here we are coming out. We actually did the trip with Nico. So running around with the campaign, and on that particular primary in that state, a lot of stuff happened for me personally. Tulsi had spoke to a bunch of people, and one of the messages that she had expressed to us was the fact that, and because Donald Trump was in town, remember Trump was having a big rally when we were there in New Hampshire. It was crazy. So she's like, she talked about like not buying into the cancel culture thing, and not, kind of shaming people who think differently than us. We had some people that were in the campaign, Eileen Tepper in particular. Yep. She's probably going to check out the show and watch the show. She came in from, I think, New York, and she talked about, her experiences about that. She went over and tried to talk to some Trump people were there, and they had her sit down at her dinner table, and they had an amazing conversation. And when she talked about it, she kind of, broke into tears. And it was just one of those moments when I realized that anybody that I'd kind of fought with, personally over the whole Trump thing, because I bought in, I was a Bernie person first, and then I bought into that whole bullshit, the cancel culture. Well, I immediately looked at those people differently, like my mother, people were like, oh, Trump people, they're bad. They're not, they're awful. You got to 86 them. They're the worst people in the world. I'm like, what do you want me to do to my mother? Bring her out back and put her down like old Yeller? It was like, so that was something that really changed for me personally, where for some reason, I was still kind of connected to that who you are politically is who you are as a person. I don't necessarily think that now necessarily. You know what I'm saying? It doesn't make everything about who you are necessarily. And there's going to be people with different ideas. And I think that was kind of, one of the thrusting points of sorts of my career to say, hey, listen, I want to make sure I talk to different people. I want to talk to conservatives. I want to talk to libertarians. I always made the joke. I'm a civil liberties guy was the thing I did for like a whole first 2 years of the Convo Couch because I was a progressive, but I always wanted to express that I believe strongly in my civil liberties. And that's what that Tulsi campaign to me was all about, protecting our civil liberties. So.
Yeah, I have a lot of really important friendships that, last to this day. Eric Jackman, met him on that campaign. Other people that I still talk to, other people I still have on the show. And it was eye-opening for me because I had never been in like a left-leaning campaign or group of people ever in my life. Like I had an uncle who lived out in Arizona who was kind of liberal, and then I had some friends who were kind of liberal, but I'd never like sat down and really listened to people from the other side of the aisle because I was brought up really religious conservative. And then once I graduated from high school, I kind of shifted over into the libertarian camp, but I never had really spent a lot of time with people talking about their political beliefs who were from the other side. And I realized there was a lot more crossover than I had thought. I was shocked because to me, big government liberal, and I know that you're going to cringe at that term, but that was like what I just looked everyone. I looked at everyone on that side as that meant like the government has to do everything for me. The government has to control everything. And I don't want people to have any freedoms and I want everything restricted. And then I found out, all these people really care about a lot of the same things I do. And then after the campaign, with everything that's happened over the last couple of years, a lot of people cared about the same restrictions on our civil liberties and our natural human rights, locking us in our houses and bailing out Wall Street while we're stuck without jobs. I realized, wow, there's really a lot of bipartisan concern over these issues, and we've used a lot of labels and a lot of partisanship that's stopped us from talking to each other. And that was one of the reasons I decided to start my show, because I just realized people don't have an accurate view of what other people think. Like everyone just builds up these walls with language, and then they never end up talking to each other and realizing, wow, we actually agree on a lot of this stuff. Did you have a moment? It sounds like you did, because you were saying Trump people used to have this opinion of them, but is that campaign one of the first times you started realizing that? And where did you see like a lot of that overlap taking place?
Well, that is the first campaign that I kind of did see like the other side. I really did, I believe the marketing that's put out there, like you talk about the walls that are put up, I kind of refer to it sometimes as the marketing. This is what, these people stand for over here, and the big thing with a lot of Trump people was the wall thing, right? And I think progressives equated that to some form of racism. Like, hey, what's going on, dude? Like, you're really just going to be open about the fact that you're racist, that you don't want other people coming into this country, right? So I think I believed a little bit in the marketing for a little while. There was no independent media really at the time. So I think a lot of our opinions were formed from what we saw on the boob tube or where we got our news from. And before, we all realized that, the mainstream, when I say we all, I speak for myself and people like myself who eventually realized that it was nothing but propaganda. And then we started seeking the truth. We saw answers there, you know what I'm saying? But, that was definitely the first campaign in which I saw that kind of movement together. And I was like, okay, there's something to it. Let me speak to these people. And then as I spoke to them, like you just said, they didn't realize, what we stood for, some of us. Because then I think people are still kind of confused about that. Even the people I think that are very, very wrong right now, a lot of my old progressive friends that still will support Bernie Sanders and still inside the Democratic Party believe that they're voting against Trump is mitigating damage. And, they support all these other establishment candidates, even though they don't even, kind of really look into their policies and see what they're voting for, where they get their money from. At the end of the day, I still think the majority of those people, they're doing what they think is the most compassionate thing. They think that they're helping minorities. They think that they're helping black people. They think that they're, you know what I'm saying? When in fact, I think, the whole thing that they've bought into, because they're in some way, they are justified through the establishment system that they can be rotten and mean to the other people. So in actuality, they're so duped when, they're very, attacking a Trump person or whatnot. They're actually becoming what they are supposed to hate. And I don't think that they understand that, they believe they are actually punching a Nazi in the nose because they listen to the marketing. But that is something I think that the Tulsi, and that's why people have a hard time holding Tulsi accountable now from some of the things that she's kind of gone off for a little bit, where I don't support her anymore. When I say I don't support her, it's like I'm just, I was more of an activist and an endorser of her, and I supported her fully. Now I don't, and I think that's kind of where I need to be anyways, doing this and this getting bigger and what we're doing and getting more eyes. We have to be more, just neutral. We can't really pick sides. So I think it's good for my job, but at the end of the day, it's because of her mishaps. But that whole movement of us, what we experienced, all people coming together, like you said, being with leftists, and me too. When I went up to New Hampshire, I met the Jackmans. I met libertarians, right-leaning libertarians. I'm a left-leaning libertarian.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know what I'm saying? I'm not in the party yet, but I say I'm a leftist libertarian. That's why I look at myself, because once again, I hold my civil liberties, freedom of the press so high. That's why the libertarian label I use here and there. But yeah, I mean, that whole movement, it was amazing. It was amazing with the Tulsi stuff. And that's why they have a hard time letting go, because of that magic that was captured in a bottle that we experienced talking to different people. It just felt good. At first we were afraid. I mean, I know there was a lot of people that were afraid to talk to Trumpers and people thought differently than them. But when we were able to say, screw it, we're just going to remember the spirit of aloha, she called it.
Oh, yeah.
Something special there, man. And
the macadamia nut toffee,
She brought that to New Hampshire, that stuff.
Oh, yeah.
Holy cow.
Yep.
You guys know that?
Yeah, I mean, you're right. I think that is why it was hard for so many people to let it go. And it's kind of amazing. Like what I've seen is there are a lot of people who had never been politically involved, and then she got them politically involved, and then they have they don't really have anything to stand on other than her. So when she does something that's wrong, people like you and me will be like, no, I'm sorry. This is, I supported her because of what she stood for, not just because she's great and, in the spirit of aloha or whatever. When she endorses Don Baldick or something, no, that's wrong. Yeah. And I feel like the cult of personality with that campaign was really strong because she had a great personality. All these other people, does Biden have a personality? I mean, Trump has a bit of a personality, I guess, but a lot of these people don't have that type of personality. And I think that added a lot into making it hard to let go too.
Yeah. But it's like you said, at the end of the day, we never really supported Tulsi. We supported the issues, and she stood by the issues. And that's why we were there. The personality thing. Yeah, that's a bonus. That's cool. I remember when she went on Bill Maher, well, 8 of us got tickets and we snuck into the studio. And it's Bill Maher's studio is probably 100 people, if that, probably 75, 85 people, whatever. It's not a lot. Mm-hmm. And, we cheered when she came out, and she didn't know we were going to be there. And she smiled so hard you can see her gums. And we knew it was a genuine smile and stuff. You know what I'm saying? And then she texted us. We took a picture from the table. We sent it to her, and then she texted us back, everybody. You know what I'm saying? She's cool. That stuff is awesome. And it's great to see her, when she does her speech. She called me out for not going to a workout on the beach when I was in LA, in a libertarian household. Somebody was doing a fundraiser for her. And there's all these things that are great. When she goes and picks up trash at the beach for her birthday. She was in LA for her birthday one day, and we set it up where we went to a park and we picked up trash and we were laughing and having a good time. That stuff's great. That's all a bonus, but that's not why you support somebody or you stand behind somebody. They're still a civil servant. You're still their constituent. They have a job to do. If they do their job poorly, whether you like them or not, you call them out. That's it. Yeah. And big ups to the New Hampshire Twitter out there. Whoever's doing that thing there, Reed. That's great. Calling out people here and there. I like that.
Yeah.
I like that Twitter handle.
Yeah, we hold people accountable over here. I feel like someone with the personality of Rand Paul is the easiest type of guy to hold accountable because, he votes right on a lot of stuff, but when he doesn't, it's really easy to criticize him because he's just such a grump, so you just don't feel bad. Like, hey, dude, what the hell? Why'd you do that? Like when you have someone who's that nice, it's harder to turn on them and be like, hey, what the hell?
It's like, Tulsi, can I get a second?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Drone strikes in Afghanistan. Really not that great, Tulsi, please.
Are you going off to Africa to do a mission to fight Al Qaeda to help destabilize them? Not really a good idea.
Yeah.
Sorry. When you call out Putin saying, like the nuclear weapon thing, like when you didn't say it, that's not a good idea.
Yeah, no, it makes it way harder. But
Paul, you just
especially
want to smack him in the back of the head. By the way, Rand Paul, you just come on, dude.
Yeah, exactly. You can tell he hates being there, and he's not going to get any more pissed off if you barrage him anyway. So he's like perfect for that. But yeah. So we were actually going to do a show like a month ago, and then when I texted you, you were headed to Brazil, and I'm not going to pretend to know anything about what's going on over there because I don't really. I've read a couple articles, but it looks like it was a very close election. Lots of people are saying it was stolen, and they want recounts. But you were actually there, so what was going on there? Why'd you go there, and what did you see while you were there?
Okay, so when I went to New Hampshire, it's kind of funny. I met a lot of people in the Tulsi campaign, and I'd say 20% of the people that I met that were part of the campaign, volunteers, maybe 15, but right around there, were specifically Tulsi followers because of the help. I believe, what was the name of her act? The election. She had an election bill that she had floated out there.
The Securing America's Elections Act.
Yeah.
That one. Yeah.
Well, they had a bill very similar in name that they brought up after that. Some of the like Wyden and them, but anyways, in that bill she had talked about very vaguely, but she mentioned an open source software versus proprietary software. She didn't present a lot of solutions in that bill, but she did say she wanted open studies, and for us to understand what was going on. Elections is the thing. In 2016, the Bernie Sanders case, where Bernie Sanders supporters, not Bernie Sanders, but Bernie Sanders supporters sued the DNC for holding a fraudulent election, not abiding by their charter, which says they have to give a Democratic election, the Democratic Party, that is. Well, in that case, the lawyer for the Democratic Party said, his name was Bruce Beaver, he stood up and said, technically, if they wanted to, the Democratic Party can go into the back room full of cigar smoke and pick whoever they want. We're just allowed to do that. And they eventually dismissed the case, notwithstanding, which is what a lot of judges do. They don't touch these cases at all, and it's kind of sad that they don't. But that kind of radicalized me for elections, and that became an issue of mine. And ever since then, I tried to learn everything about elections as I can, starting in the United States. And when I got pretty active in that, because remember, we when I met you, and possibly I think we ran into each other in that bar, the Tulsi, her party there.
You were there. I were there. Yeah. So
that's where we ran in that night. We were out there to look at the primary, and we were looking at it, and from a technical point of view. So we went and talked to election officials. We went and seen the machines. They talked about a SIM card being inside the machines. They kind of like, oh no, there's a SIM card in there. I'm like, yeah, okay. So it's connected to the internet, pretty much, And it was interesting enough that Tulsi got the 8% that she was polling at in all the hand counted places, but less than 2% in the machine counted places. A lot of them that we discovered, you know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. We didn't necessarily share this information with the campaign, but we were looking at it, and, it looked a little funny. But these are the problems that were there. These were the issues. And so I also started studying international elections, as you know, coming on the left, but I come from like the anti-imperialist left, right? The foreign policy left. That was the reason why we started the Convo Couch. We wanted to get grassroots, independent candidates, time for interviews that they couldn't get in the mainstream. We want to get them some airtime. And we also wanted to, to take foreign policy issues. And this is why we also like Tulsi as well. And we wanted to bring them to our progressive friends. Mm-hmm. So we had all these anti-imperialist friends that would go to these countries and observe their elections. And one day a friend of mine says, hey, man, we're going to go to the Nicaraguan election and observe it. I don't think they have a lot of people who kind of do what you guys do, meaning a lot of the people that go there, they're like the real social justice warriors, not the bullshit ones we have in the United States. They go there, they see the socioeconomic problems, they talk to a lot of Afro-Indigenous, they get their stories, they examine what the military does, the coups, the whole 9 yards. But they don't like scrutinize the process of elections. And for quite some time, me and my partners, we, Fiorella, we believe that the only way to a true democracy is with free, fair, and transparent elections. Now, I think Fiorella is kind of, I don't want to speak for her, but I think she's moved beyond counting on elections. You know what I'm saying? Like, voting out an oligarchy is not going to happen, especially when they have the whole system under control. So what we do is we just constantly highlight the process of elections. And we were able to go to Nicaragua, then we went to Honduras, Peru, Colombia, then last Brazil. So I know this was a long story to get to Brazil, but that's how it happened. We just started studying international elections because there's two reasons we wanted to do it, Reed. Number one, we know that our government is all about empire, and they like to go in there and change regimes, especially in the global South and Latin America, because they want to put in their own puppets so they can extract the resources, force the monetary system. We know this game. I mean, this is where, I like calling myself a libertarian nowadays, because Ron Paul is like the only true guy to stick it through and be the real true non-interventionist out there and call every single intervention out. He's one of the best. But we would go down, examine these elections, look at the process. So we end up in Brazil. And from all the other elections, we were able to go back into the United States and say, hey, listen, ladies and gentlemen, this is a big scam. This is probably the biggest scam. The fact that you can't have free, fair, transparent elections in one day with results that night is ridiculous. And you can have fair ones too as well, with mandatory ID, showing up at your designated polling spot, your voting spot, efficiency, and make sure that you get through the lines quickly, because the average time to vote in Colombia is 6 minutes. The average time to vote in Nicaragua is 7 minutes. I mean, it's ridiculous. And our elections, hours. So who wants to participate in that? That's the reason why people went to go to mail-ins. And guess what? In the 5 countries I went to, no mail-in ballots, no drop boxes in the middle of nowhere. It's public counting in front of everybody. They take it out of the ballot box. There's a strict chain of custody. Clean voter rolls. You have to register to vote each election. You know what I'm saying? There's stuff you have to do. And I'm not saying that we have to do all these things, but the fact that we can't have results in election, I think it took like a week, but we're like, oh, finally they called the Arizona race a week after. I mean, you can just keep counting until you get the results you want, for crying out loud. So, that's what we were doing. So Brazil, we went down to Brazil, and Brazil is a little bit interesting because there is vulnerabilities in the system. It has all those securities we just talked about. Clean voter rolls. You got to register within 5 months of that election. 1 day of voting. It's on a Sunday, on a national holiday. That's what they do in all these countries. We need to do the same thing. You have to show up at your designated place with ID. You know what I'm saying? And then they do public counting, but the public counting comes out of a machine and the voting is in the machine. So that's why I gave it a B- rating, because it has all those securities, and you get the results that night. It has all those securities, but it does have what's called a DRE, direct recorded electronical device. In other words, you get your ID, you go into the machine, you hit your buttons, and then you're done. No paper comes out, no receipt, no nothing. But it is open source software. All the candidates have a right to go look at the software to check the machines. They're not connected to the internet. I took my phone and I went around. So I went to an opening and I went to a closing, and where I went, I took my phone and I went by each machine, and there was no internet picking up. I looked to make sure to see if it plugged into any internet. Was not plugged into any internet. So there, even though I will never, ever completely trust a DRE voting machine, and that's why I gave it a B-, I haven't seen the solid proof that there was any monkey business going around. And to be perfectly honest with you, Reed, this is where I'm crazy right now. I'm kind of glad I'm on this show today, because the right, the Jack Posobics, the freaking Steve Bannons, the InfoWars, even Tucker was a little bit bad on this, right? They're just kind of trying to make these false comparisons to like what happened in the States in 2020. Some of them even use the word ballots. There are no ballots in Brazil. It's a direct recording device. It's on a machine. So there's no ballots. They try to say there's dumps. There's no dumps. And then they try to say that Lula was kind of like Biden and Bolsonaro was like Trump. And from what I've noticed, a lot of the stuff that you're seeing on TV, some of it, they keep showing the old independence parade that Bolsonaro also had a rally on during that Brazilian Independence Day. A friend of mine was at that rally, you know, my boy Danny Shaw, he told me about it. So they kind of used that rally that had like 1 million people and stuff that came out for Independence Day across the country and act like it was just a Bolsonaro rally. You know what I'm saying? Because Bolsonaro kind of adapted the colors of the flag, the green and the yellow of Brazil, for his campaign colors, where Lula was red and black. So, you know, the Lula people, you see them with the L and they wear the red and black, and Bolsonaro, they wear the green and the yellow, the traditional Brazilian soccer colors. But the thing is that Lula was twice the president. He was thrown in jail by the help of our State Department, then released from evidence that Glenn Greenwald got a hold of. He eradicated extreme poverty at one point. And when we went to the favelas, we were there for 12 days, and we talked to everybody, Reed. Cab drivers, waiters. We met with all the labor groups. We go on the streets. You know, the Convo Couch does their work. When people give us coin to go to these places, we come back with a lot of content. We met with the election officials. We went with them for an hour and a half before to ask everything about the system, got all their information. That's how I know how the system works, because we do our due diligence. But the really disingenuous part about that right conservative part is they're trying to make Lula look like Biden. He's not. Like I said, 2-time president, jailed, eradicated extreme poverty at one point. You know what I'm saying? And it's just wrong to say that. There's a reason. When we went into the favelas, the poorest people in there, all the labor groups too, the MST, they liked Lula. He wasn't a communist, but he was definitely a compromise between the capitalists and communists, because he would allocate resources and money and food to all the poorer places. This is where that group feels that they were disenfranchised from Bolsonaro. Okay, that the extreme poor, the labor groups, the small agriculture. See, and when people talk about Lula's relationship to the WEF and his love for vaccines, and he does like vaccines, he says he's not going to mandate it, but he says he's going to, you know, he'll get some. You know, I'm sure he'll do that. He didn't say that verbatim, but that's the insinuation. They talked about H1N1, the way he liked the results of that when he was the president and how they used that vaccine. So I think he's a little bit duped. His connections to Wall Street, the banks, his connections to Obama and Biden and everything. And it's obvious that Biden wanted Lula and they didn't want Bolsonaro anymore. They didn't want the Bolsonaro experiment. But all these leaders, Reed, when I went to Colombia and Petro was getting into power, which is considered a leftist, but once again, not a hardcore leftist, kind of like a middle of the road guy. When we went in Honduras, Xiomara Castro, who was Manuel Zelaya's wife. All these leaders have to do business with the devil inside their house. In other words, when a leader walks into his living room, the devil's already sitting there eating crumpets and having tea. All these countries are infested with NGOs. A lot of these countries, like Colombia, like Honduras, have huge military bases with American troops there. You know, if the leaders step out of line, they'll be cooed the very next day. Manuel Zelaya was taken out of his house in his underwear during the Obama administration when Hillary Clinton was Secretary of State, because he joined ALBA, and they weren't going to mess around with that. So they took him out. And we know what we do in Haiti. So there's a way that a lot of these leaders, where some of them, people like us in the States, were like, oh, they're entitled with globalists. They're entitled with globalists. They got to deal with these people. There's no way they can deal without them. And I think the United States is now at a point where they're compromising with the people they're allowing in, because they realize if they push too far, they'll have another Cuba, Nicaragua, Venezuela, where they'll lose the country because they showed too much muscle, and the people will say no, they'll reject it. So they're in that way. But when it comes to Brazil, Bolsonaro also led in all these multinational corporations, and this is coming from the labor groups that told me this. Monsanto, they tried to get rid of the small farmer there pretty much, and there was a lot of indigenous people who was fighting over property rights, where all these major corporations were grabbing all these resources. A lot of talk about what he did in the Amazon. There's a reason why people voted against him, too. There's the poverty issue there is ridiculous. Fiorella had her phone stolen by a bike when somebody going by. My friend Danny Shaw. I mean, it's just like there looks like there's some social and civil unrest there. And that's why there's a lot of people that did reject Bolsonaro and went with Lula. It's logical to think that Lula won. And that's what they're trying to tell you is not happening. You know what I'm saying? And that's the thing that just drives me crazy. There's a reason why people would reject Bolsonaro, you know, and they're just being disingenuous. Does that mean there's no fraud? I haven't seen it. You know what I'm saying? I would take the Brazilian system 1,000 times over the United States system. I don't want a DRE machine, and I think they should eventually go to hand-marked paper ballots like we saw Colombia, Honduras, Nicaragua, and Peru do, and they count them in public. I mean, I think that's the best way. But right now, I just see two sides being really, really disingenuous because all those things we talked about Lula too, Reed, the left never mentions them. They skip over them. You know what I'm saying? Like, I'm really upset right now that Lula's at the B20 and the G20. Like, why? You have shit. You haven't even signed your fucking, you're not even the president yet. Go back home and try to quell this situation and get it under control because there are rallies out there. So, I mean, I'm not going to hold that against Lula. At the end of the day, all I care about is that the people get to decide their leader. And I still think that Lula won the election until proven otherwise, because people are very vague about this whole situation. And here's the thing too, Reed, it's the same system that Bolsonaro won 5 elections on in Congress, his last presidency, right? So why all of a sudden when you lose, you complain about it now?
Yeah.
I don't know.
That's how it works.
Yeah.
That's how everyone does it.
It's not like Donald Trump, right? With 2020, everything changed, Reed. They put all these drop boxes out there, mass mail outs. They did all these things. They changed all these rules. So to make these comparisons, it's not right.
So what type of transformation is going to take place with Bolsonaro leaving and Lula going in? Like, is it going to be a radical change, or does the president, how much power does he have?
He's got a decent amount of power to allocate some money and resources, but I mean, they have all the bullshit we have in this country. I mean, that's the thing is I talked to a doctor out there and we talked about ivermectin. And, you know, this is the area where a lot of, Patriots, America First people, the Bannon crew, the reason why they like Bolsonaro is probably one of the most anti-vaccine presidents out there, except he'd say stupid shit like, hey, man, you take this vaccine, you're going to turn into an alligator. Yeah. Well, nobody's going to take you serious when you say that, but he highly rejected it. He did try to get ivermectin out to a lot of people. But when I say Brazil has the same crap that we have over here, I mean, they got a stranglehold from the global economy and big pharma out there, you know, their media, they have media issues too as well that control everything. But I don't know what kind of transformation is going to take place. I know this much. Bolsonaro waited a couple days, then he made the announcement. He didn't necessarily say the words concede. He didn't say Lula's name, but his chief of staff came up to the microphone and said, we're starting the transition process. So they are starting the transition process. They have started it. I think there's going to be a lot of people in the streets for a little bit, but I think they'll eventually go back home. And then I think that Bolsonaro will do the same thing that Donald Trump's doing. Do his campaign for the next, 2 to 4 years to run for president when he gets a chance again. I mean, here's the thing, really, and I know a lot of people are in the streets with the whole Bolsonaro thing, and it might seem that, this is just robbery, highway robbery. No, there's plenty of Lula people out there. The country's split. There's something that's really, it also has the same culture, Reed, where the middle class or the lower class, like all the gig workers, the Uber workers and stuff, and we talked to a lot of them, there is kind of like a little looking down upon the poorest of the poor, right? Like they despise them in a way. But Lula talked about this years ago, right? He says, people hated me during my presidency because they saw some of the poorest people at the airport where they can travel now. They can eat, you know what I'm saying? And I think the allocating of money and resources to a lot of people in that lower class who are just working their ass off, there's resentment there. And I feel that same thing in our country here as I did in Brazil, and that's why it's split. I mean, Bolsonaro had to kind of govern over the COVID era, right? So the country really had hard times financially. It's bad. The homeless problem, bad. Sao Paulo, you know what I'm saying? But he didn't really reside over any big economic times. But what he did bring was the culture war stuff. There's a lot of conservative people. Brazil's a conservative country. There's people are conservative there. You know what I'm saying? They're Christian conservative. And I think that is what really his whole movement was. It was a lot like, the culture war Trump stuff.
Gotcha. Yeah, I mean, when you're talking about Jack Posobiec and the Tucker Carlsons and Steve Bannons of the world, that kind of bleeds a little bit into the libertarian movement with, their anti-regime change until it's a socialist. Then it's like, oh well, I mean, when you start talking about South American countries or China or something, I feel like this sentiment is finally starting to go away a little bit, but especially a couple of years ago. Once you start talking about socialism and communism, then suddenly cooing isn't actually so bad, and sanctions might not actually be the worst thing in the world, and maybe we should kind of make them fear us. It's a kind of an amazing phenomenon. But what's kind of funny is now you're seeing that on the left. I know, like the Democrats feel the same way about that too. Some of them are almost worse than the Republicans on that shit. It's just kind of amazing to witness.
Yeah, well, we couldn't leave Afghanistan because the Taliban was going to be mean to the women. We got to get Putin out of power because he's anti-LGBT. I mean, they justify their beats. It's just, they just take the glorification of their candidates, of their party, of their virtue signaling, thinking they're right and the other person's wrong, and they just play team sports with it. You're absolutely right, and the controllers know how to move these people in the right way. And I'm so glad you brought up the socialist thing, because it's like, Rand Paul's book. By the way, I told the story when Clint. And I can't remember who else it was. We were standing in the middle, like of the aisle where your booth was.
Oh yeah.
And I'm like, guys, Ron Paul's signing books, and you guys are like, what? And you guys are about. I'm like, oh, I mean Rand, and you're like, oh,
like that's a bit of a difference.
It was like it was this. Sorry, Rand. We got a nice toaster. Go home, pal. Yeah. But his book was called "The Case Against Socialism," whatever it was. And you're right. There's a justification. There's a manufacturing of consent that if we're going to go down and remove Daniel Ortega from Nicaragua, we're removing him because he's a socialist. But here's the thing that I'm trying to do too as well. And this is something I hope that some of my friends who said they would do it. Come with me down to these countries, to Nicaragua, because they're socially conservative. They really are. You know what I'm saying? Their Marxism, and I'll see Marx books all the time, has nothing to do with the bullshit cultural Marxism that's over here in the States or whatever you want, campus Marxism, when it's all about identity and culture wars. None of that stuff. They're very religious. They pray on Sunday. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. They don't believe in gay marriage. They don't believe in abortion. I'm not saying that it's right or wrong. What I'm just saying is that they're socially conservative. And, like we've had talks about the gender situation here, and they can't believe it sometimes, And this is when you go to some of the poor areas and, Nicaragua and stuff. But I used to make the joke, is like, they're like Trumpers that speak Spanish. It's just their economics is about Marxism sometimes and whatnot. And I'm not saying that's right, but it's a misconception, because when people when people use the term here, you Marxist, you know what I'm saying, which I've seen some people Antifa, I know
immediately. Yeah.
It's, come on, guys. Like, and it bothers me because it's playing into the leaders or the ruling class's hands to keep people divided. You're a communist. You're a fascist. You're a capitalist. You're a socialist. It's like, guys, stop. And I think because we were in that whole Tulsi campaign, we were able to see the crossover. And you know what I'm saying? And unfortunately, in the United States, the left party is not left at all. It's just like, not from what we consider to be leftist, what left is like, I mean, I want to have responsible, nuanced conversations about how we treat the planet. You know what I'm saying? Like, I think I'm not an alarmist when it comes to, global warming and stuff, but I don't want us to frack. I would ban fracking in a heartbeat because it screws our water. It screws up our water, and I don't want to deal with it. You know what I'm saying? When it comes to all our bases, our army bases and our military bases, I want those son of a bitches closed. I want them closed tomorrow. I do believe healthcare is a human right, but I don't want the government controlling my healthcare. But so there's quagmires there, but I mean, I still have leftist values. So I don't know. And like, I believe in co-ops and that kind of thing. And that, as as a capitalist, I would ask you, and a lot of libertarians, I know they're this Austrian economics that the Mises Caucus is talking about, they refer to, and I know it's when my friend Jeffrey P. Hurley, who's the chair of the Clark County Libertarian Party, I said, would you call it compassionate capitalism? And he's like, I don't know if you would call it that, but yeah, I mean, So it's like I think there's, you know, I know the whole part of a lot of the economics when it comes to the Libertarian Party is removing the entity that's always in the way, the government and the hurdles. But as a leftist, I still want to find ways that we can allocate money and resources to those who need it most.
Yeah. Did you see Peter Schiff go on Jimmy Dore? That was a crossover I never thought I'd ever see. I don't know if you caught that episode. That was a few months ago. But
I think I did see it. I think I saw bits and pieces of it.
Fascinating to watch because I mean, we're just having. It's like you said, all the lines are disappearing. Like it's just becoming a weird situation where, you know, people realize they care about the same thing and they hate the same thing. Yeah, I mean, when Peter Schiff is kind of the guy who really influenced me economically when he went to Occupy Wall Street and he's talking to, I don't know if you've seen this video, but I think it's back in 2010. He's out 2010, I think. I forget. It's somewhere around there. He's out there on the street walking around talking to a bunch of teenagers. He's out there for like 3 hours and he's talking to them about what the structural problems are. And it is like, you know, the Federal Reserve bailing out all these giant corporations and taking money from the poor and giving it to the rich. And then when there's more inflation, the rich can buy up assets that'll appreciate along with inflation and the poor get screwed over. So, I mean, I guess you could call that compassionate capitalism, realizing that, yeah, I mean, the thing is, like, at the beginning of all this shit with COVID back in 2020, everyone was screaming, like, we need to just print off money. We just need to do it. We need to do it. And it tugged on a lot of people's heartstrings. And a lot of people were saying, look, if we print off money, first of all, the government's not going to give it to the people who need it. They're just not, regardless of what we'd want them to do. They're going to give it to corporations and they're going to pat themselves on the back and, you know, buy some more aircraft carriers with it or whatever. But then on top of that, even if they pump a ton of money into the economy, it's going to ultimately benefit the rich because maybe the poor people can use it to get 1 week of groceries or 1 week of gasoline or whatever, but they can't save it because they don't have any savings, you know, in reserve. So they just got to go buy whatever they can. And then it's all going to end up floating to the top where people can actually buy assets that'll appreciate along with inflation. And then sure enough, that's what happened. You know, trillions of dollars printed off and all injected into corporations. And then inflation just wiped out the middle class, and the rich are doing okay because they could buy stuff that would appreciate along with inflation.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's the where we might have a little bit of a difference. And so there is like, it's not so much the printing of the money, which they printed off so much way too much money, and they could have done it responsibly. But when they were forcing people to stay locked down, it was just the allocation process. I thought that was like who they allocated the money, who got the money. You know what I'm saying? Because you said, like, you know, all these rich corporations got it. And if they were responsible and they gave it to the people, you know, wouldn't that have been better in a way? I mean, they had been better. It would have been better, but there has to be some type of, you know, compensation of sorts when you're shutting everything friggin' down. You know what I'm saying? It's like you crush people's livelihoods. You can't just, you know.
Oh yeah, no, it was criminal. The thing is, like, where I got to in 2020, at the beginning, I was like, hey, the government should do this, and then, you know, they did nothing that they should have done. And then by the time the third bill went through or something, I was just like, you know what? It doesn't matter what we think they should do. It literally doesn't. Like, when you have people like Bernie Sanders, who supposedly stand up for the working class and care about poor people being screwed over by corporations, voting for the CARES Act, like, it's just over. Like, there's it doesn't matter what we think they should do. It just comes down to the fact that when something like this is going to happen, they're going to do what they're always going to do. So I went through a transformation in 2020. I used to, you know, really think the way to go was try to get someone in office who would dismantle this from the top down, take the head off of the beast, and, you know, kind of try to stabilize things. And after 2020, I just gave up on that. I mean, I think there's value to, like, if Dave runs for president or something, I think there's value there because he could bring attention to things, but I'm not under any misconception that he'll win. And even if he did, he wouldn't be allowed to do anything that would actually fix anything. Where I am is, like, it's all about starving the beast. It's all about, you know, pushback against the federal government. And that's why I moved back to New Hampshire for the Free State Project, because I just, I don't think that, you know, regardless of what we think the government should do, it's just never going to do it, and we're so far past the point of no return. I don't see it fixing itself and righting the ship anytime soon.
I think there's something there with anarchism. You know what I'm saying? The funny thing is I never, like, when I first heard about anarchism, I was like, obviously the bad name. And then I met a guy named Keith McHenry from Food Not Bombs, and he made the Anarchist Cookbook, but it was a retake, like kind of like it was about vegan recipes to feed the homeless. And Food Not Bombs, and he talked about anarchy in this beautiful way, and it's just, I'm like, okay, I get it now, I see it. You know, it's nobody has a monopoly on violence. You know,
I had a similar transformation because it was funny. Like in the fall of 2020, I really just like didn't want to consider myself an anarchist because it's like a ugly term in my mind at that point. It was like, ooh, I don't want to like admit that just seems like nuts and no one will want to listen to me. But then after they passed that COVID bill in December of 2020, the one that Trump like originally said he wasn't going to sign or whatever, and then he capitulated and signed it, I was just like, God damn. I mean, the idea that we need some government, you know, because they're going to be the responsible guys. And then I realized on top of that, like the minarchist, like minimal government argument is that the government isn't capable enough to run the minuscule things in our lives, so we should only have them run the most important things. And I was like, yeah, you know, God damn, like this really doesn't make much sense. But I don't know what I call myself, like a practical anarchist at this point. Like I realize government isn't going away. I mean, I'm also an atheist, and I call myself like a practical atheist because I realize religion isn't going away. And then similarly to religion, I realize like some people just need government. Like I wish that weren't the case. Like some people need religion. Some people do need some sort of framework holding them together. And they're, as long as they want it, they're never going to let it go. And that's okay as long as, you know, I can make my own decisions. So I just go where the least amount of government is. And, you know, New Hampshire's pretty peaceful. You know, you spent a lot of time here. And I think culture is really important too. Like I think a lot of anarchists miss the point that, you know, if you don't have a peaceful society, then anarchy really isn't going to work. Like it's a dual front battle. You got to get people to trust each other again and actually take care of each other, like you're talking about. Like if you have people who aren't willing to help their neighbors or help their family when they need help monetarily, or they need, you know, help building something in their backyard or whatever, then the government's never going to go away. You know, it's kind of I think as the government's gotten bigger, that sense of community has gotten smaller. People do less and less and less for each other. So the flip side of that is, if we want this stuff to go away, we've got to start taking the initiative and doing this stuff for our family, for our friends, and then it'll become, you know, unnecessary.
Do you ever see the Holy Grail?
Monty Python? Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah.
The scene in the beginning with the thing with who lives there, and he's talking about an anarchist society and how they do the voting and stuff.
The two guys who have the sacks over their heads. Or
It's like, who are you? We're your king. Oh, you're the king.
Yeah.
The violence is embedded in the system. You see what I'm saying? Ian Davis is kind of cool. We've had him on the morning show several times. I first saw Ian, and it's funny because I didn't see him when he was on with Steve, but I saw Ian Davis do a panel with Tom Luongo, Whitney Webb, Matt Ehret, and what's his name? The dude, Robbie Wagaman, I think his name is. The dude who's in Russia. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's his name. I saw them do a panel, and it was awesome. But we had Ian Davis come on, and he talks about like these old school systems that were kind of like, I don't know if they were ever used, but he talks about several like an anarchist system, how the rotates with the people kind of governing of sorts, you know. So therefore, there's no one held power that can get continuously strong. You know, I mean, I think we need to. That's the whole beauty of anarchism in a way, is that I look at it a little bit like Bitcoin sometimes, like its own ecosystem, right? There's no centralized mechanism. So why can't we have a government where there's no centralized mechanism and just, you know, live free? And you're right. It's going to take a long time for us to get back there because being practical, knowing the government's not going away, it's not going to relinquish its power for quite sometimes. Also, like you said, the people have kind of now been less part of community. There's a form of narcissism in their political ideology because their life, there's part of narcissism because they don't have to communicate with their community. They don't have to be part of it. Somebody could stay inside their house, not speak to anybody, have their food, everything delivered to them, not be part of society in any way, shape, or form. And when you have that type of community, you know what I'm saying, with a bunch of individuals, you don't have a community. So it's interesting, but I'd like to see us get there one day because I hate the fucking violence that's going on that's really just ignored on a regular basis, you know. But now I understand, you know, if I would have saw your opening video to your show here a couple years ago, I would have been like, he's one of those guys. He loves his guns. Now it's like, yeah, I want to shoot one of those with him. And people are like, why do you want a gun now? All of a sudden, I'm like, because the state. I don't want the state to only have one out. I don't want these assholes being the only ones with guns anymore. That's it. No more. So I've changed there too as well. But yeah, I mean, I get it, but I don't know. I just think we're so far away right now. If we didn't have those guns, we'd probably be under a lot worse, you know, oppression. Literally.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of other countries that don't have as many guns as we do ended up a lot worse over the last couple of years. I don't know if you watched it. I watched Tulsi Gabbard's episode she did about how she changed on gun control, and I don't know how much of that is sincere, but certainly the thought process she laid out, I have seen that mirrored in a lot of people on the left over the last couple of years who were like really pro gun control, and I probably know personally a couple dozen people who consider themselves more left-wing who have completely flipped on that. It is pretty incredible.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, that's one, too, I'm open about. What about these mass shootings? Go talk to the FBI. Every single one of those. Instead of saying where did he get the gun from, blah, 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 all this stuff, first thing you look at is, has he ever had connections with the FBI? Mm-hmm. You know, and you know, Steve said something interesting. It's like you don't even need to MK Ultra these people anymore. In society nowadays, we got our kids so drugged up, so much Adderall out there, all this other antidepressants and all this stuff, and the way society's built, you can radicalize a kid just by flicking a switch, get a couple posts, and he'll snap very easy. I mean, that's just the way it is, you know.
Yeah, no, it's true. Well, I'm glad we had this discussion, man. We'll have to talk again soon. I'll be coming on your show at some point soon, and
maybe Monday.
I
got to check the schedule, get you up nice early in the morning, and see if we get you on, brother. Have some fun time. But when you get back from Maine too, let's hook up for sure.
Yeah, no, I think these types of it's funny. I talked to Jackson Hinkle yesterday. I don't know if you know him. Mm-hmm. Very interesting conversation, you know, and I got a lot of hate for talking to him, which is kind of funny, but I actually like getting a little hate because, you know, are you familiar with the plank that used to be in the Libertarian Party platform that was, we condemn bigotry as irrational and repugnant? It was just kind of this corny thing. So we would say that about anything just as a joke, like I condemn, you know, this is irrational and repugnant. And it is a libertarian thing. A lot of people, like, if you talk to anybody outside your circle, they want you to make it very clear that you disagree with them on X, Y, Z. And, you know, they want you to debate everybody about every single thing you disagree on. And it's like, I don't know. I don't think that's very interesting. And I've done a couple debates, like I've done capitalism versus socialism debates and stuff. And when you're going into a conversation like that, it's not a conversation, first of all, it's a debate. And you already have predetermined what you think, and you're not going in with an open mind to hear what the other side says. Yeah. And then usually your opponent is the same way. And then I'd say for the most part, the audience is the same way. Like they're going in with a preconceived idea of what they support, and they just hope that whichever position they have just absolutely destroys the other person. Yeah. Where with all the times I've changed my mind, it's been from listening to people talk to each other and being like, oh, you know, that actually makes a little bit of sense. So I feel like that's the most constructive way to have these conversations, because it's the only way we get anywhere.
Yeah. If that's the whole thing with a debate, the debate me bros, is that they actually are going out there to beat their opponents. Debates are supposed to be having robust discussion, come up with robust ideas. And that's the things that's going to change your mind. That's why anytime I have a debate, I kind of like label it as a discussion of sorts. because I want to learn something from it. Maybe change my ideas on things and stuff. But so that is the way you have to approach those things. And we shouldn't be, nobody should be giving hate for talking to, anybody who thinks differently than them. Did you see some of the hate that like Whitney was getting for talking to Glenn Beck? I mean, it was like, come on, dude. I'm like, come on. Like, oh, you're talking to a Khan? Oh, just shut up. Just shut up.
I would absolutely talk to Glenn Beck if I got the chance. Like, that's what I don't understand is like, I mean, if I don't know, if Sean Hannity wanted to have me on the show, I'd absolutely take that opportunity. And, depending on what we're talking about, maybe I'm not even going to necessarily blast him when I'm on the air. Maybe I can make a more convincing argument by being a nice guy when I'm up there and saying something that makes sense or whatever. This is what people wonder, why the liberty movement never goes anywhere. This might be part of the reason, because we're just a bunch of autistic nerds who can't just have a normal conversation with someone who might disagree. But
I do have a question though.
Sure.
About because I mean it's interesting because I've been talking about what I call the Great Compromise. I don't know why I'm saying it's just a compromise, and I'm talking about people going into the Libertarian Party, including myself. Like, Jeffrey Hurley, the guy I mentioned earlier, he says, "I'm glad we got you." I'm like, "Well, you ain't got me yet. You got my attention, right?" You know what I'm saying? This is where I'm at, but I'm very interested because of the Mises Caucus. I saw, I have had Dave on the show with Jimmy Dore, right? We put them on together, and actually now the people are making the joke like, okay, why don't you compromise, Dave, and take a progressive, Dave Dore 24, let's go. But I'm interested to know about this Mises Caucus because I've been kind of selling it to a lot of leftists and progressives, and they're like, really? You're looking at the Libertarian Party? Well, it's the only really third party out there. Let's be honest. I have friends that are green. If you look at the Green Party, I would probably align a lot with the Green Party, maybe even more than the Libertarian Party in certain areas. But their national support right now is very, very weak. They're not on all the ballots. They're going through this transitional thing where people are breaking off in different Green parties. They're still going with the Howie Hawkins situation, which is just ridiculous. So you want to talk about ballot access and just put together, that's the Libertarian Party. But here's the thing. They have a new sheriff in town. They have a new party. They have new management. It's called the Mises Caucus. And the thing I've noticed most about it is that they're very much, some of the people who are very up in the Mises Caucus seem to be aligning themselves with the Ron Paul mentality. Dave, I was watching the show yesterday. We had Kurt Metzger on yesterday morning. So Kurt told us about the show he did with Jimmy and Dave with these other two dudes, and we went and watched it. It was like just crazy and stuff. But David even said, he goes, I'm a libertarian in the Ron Paul sense. So I've been kind of out there talking about the Great Compromise. Let's maybe go take a look and consider the Libertarian Party in Nevada, even though I don't think my vote was counted or it was washed out by a bunch of other extra dead people or people moved ballots, because that's what we have in these fucking situations in this ridiculous system. By the way, the American system is worse than any place I've been to. All those other countries wipe the floor as far as credibility with their
elections. That's pretty unflattering that South American countries have better
Nicaragua.
systems.
Nicaragua's got a better election system than us. Honduras. It is ridiculous. But I voted Libertarian in the last election. I voted for one Republican. It was the first Republican I ever voted for. First Libertarians I voted for. But I met a lot of these guys locally at the Libertarian meetups. So I voted Libertarian. So my question to you is this something that you think a lot, and the crossover, you were a Tulsi guy, we right there, so we understand the crossover. How do we sell the Libertarian Mises Caucus to the other progressives, who are considering, maybe looking elsewhere?
Yeah, so I one of the reasons I have a ton of respect for Ron Paul is he actually never compromised. I think a lot of people would think of him as somebody who worked across the aisle, and that's true, but he never sacrificed any of his principles. He had this idea that the only way we're going to ever get anywhere is through single issue coalitions. So, he and Dennis Kucinich worked a lot together on like foreign policy stuff, civil liberties, I think probably drug legalization stuff. And that way you can get together without actually sacrificing anything you think. So I would, to libertarians, some of them think that like, if we run someone more milquetoast, more down the middle, like that'll be more impressive to people who aren't libertarian. And I don't think that's true. Like Cenk Uyghur's probably more moderate than Jimmy Dore, right? But I have a lot more respect for Jimmy Dore because he actually stands for something, right? Like he's fiery and he obviously cares about what he's talking about. That's a lot more attractive to me than some left winger who's like, yeah, but I don't really want Medicare for all. That's a little crazy. We should like have this type of system or whatever. But if they're not really, if they don't sell me on it, if they don't sell me that they're serious, even if I disagree with them, I'm just not interested. So I feel like libertarians, we're going to attract more people if we're just really serious about the issues we really care about. And I think if your number one issue is I don't know, some privatizing the sidewalks or something, like it's probably not very winning issue. So I really think, especially with everything that's going on right now, war, foreign policy should be the number one issue.
But that's like 14% of the people really care about foreign policy.
I know.
It is a little bit more inflated nowadays with the whole Ukraine situation because of the money that's attached to it. But
yeah.
I mean, here's the other question, by the way. How do you guys get your message out, a centralized message out with a decentralized party? Like,
it's hard.
It's very hard. I mean, keeping everybody on the same page and stuff. I can just imagine that Angela will probably be pulling her hair out of her head when she sees certain stuff out there. The Martha Bueno stuff, thank God she's out of the goddamn party.
Yeah,
but
no
what
shit.
we saw in Miami is like, okay, and I went to Freedom Fest and I got into a little, back and forth with her on her panel. I mean, she's just manufacturing consent for regime change in Cuba. And I'm like, I don't give a shit. Like, that's not libertarian. We don't get involved. That's it. You know what I'm saying? And that's you saw, I mean, I know a lot of people were like, when Joe Biden was getting out there running around the country with people, and a lot of the candidates were like, nah, you're cool. You don't have to come run and stomp. But you did see them get out there. Obama got out there. You know what I'm saying? We didn't see that with the Libertarian Party. There were some Libertarian candidates. I didn't see him out there with, and right now, for me, my guy in the Libertarian Party is Spike Cohen. It is. That's where I'm at right now.
He's great.
Every time I see Dave, I am impressed. I do have issues, do have questions. I am impressed, though, with his foreign policy knowledge, but sometimes I'm not impressed with his decisions. And this is something that, like, when he was on Rogan and he was talking about the whole Russia situation, the Russia war, he does kind of retract back to that kind of position. Well, we got to be anti-war about everything. So you can't justify Russia going into Ukraine. You know what I'm saying? Like, and I'm like, yes, you can. And this is where I want, somebody to take their hat off and go, they're on their border. There's a puppet government that overturned Ukraine in 2014. They're bombing ethnic people in the Donbass. I'm sorry. Yeah, yes, they should have gotten involved. They should have gotten involved a lot earlier. You know what I'm saying? And that's just my personal opinion, and I know a lot of people share that opinion. But I'm afraid because of the ideology handcuffs, and I know what ideology handcuffs mean. When you can't think for yourself or say anything, you got to stay in party form or ideology form. The whole, like, I got to be opposed to war no matter what mentality is somewhat of a handicap, and it doesn't allow you to call balls and strikes properly. And that's the one area where I saw Dave where I was like, okay, I'm not crazy about that. I called up Clint. I told him, I'm like, yeah, Clint, I'm not crazy about this here right here. I'm not pro-Putin. I know my partner's over in Russia. I know you call us our resident commies and we joke around and stuff. I'm not here to sell you Russia. But what happened, and, the thing that was frustrating is Dave knows all the facts. He knows what happened in 2014. He knows everything. I'm very impressed with his knowledge. But all that information should say, okay, this is justified. And we need to expect these things. And the thing that needs to be pointed out is America's involvement. America should have never been involved. And I know he says that too as well. But I don't know. Scott Horton too. Scott Horton at Freedom Fest. He says, no, they shouldn't have done this. I'm like, this is where I disagree with you guys. And it's very nice to be supporting a party that's extra passive. It doesn't work.
It's too passive.
It's very
This is the way I look at it. So I've said this on the show many times. I look at things from two different perspectives, like idealistic, like anarchist perspective. And then there's also the real world geopolitical perspective. So yeah, do I think a lot of innocent Ukrainians are getting killed? Yes. Is that wrong? Yes. But when we're looking at these situations from a realistic geopolitical perspective, the ideology kind of goes out the window, because it's like, well, yeah, I mean, innocent people are getting killed, and this sucks, but what can we possibly do? Do you know Dan McAdams from the Ron Paul Institute? He's the best. He's the go-to guy. Like,
I love that dude.
He really hammers that that idea home, that these people claiming that they care, and I'm not talking about Dave or Scott right now. I'm talking about like Mike Pompeo or any of these guys that are worried about Uyghurs in camps in China, or worried about Iranian protesters who have to wear hijabs. It's like, dude, you care about Muslims in Iran or China? You're responsible for the murder of thousands of Muslims. So whenever those people are like trying to get tear jerking, like, I'm just very careful. I wrote a Substack about this. I'll send it to you after, and I'll post it in the show links. But it's called You Don't Care, and it was when these first Iranian protests were taking off, and it's just about how you frame the conversation to actually make life better for these people. So if you do care about the Iranian protesters, then you want all sanctions on Iran to cease immediately.
Absolutely.
And you realize that airstriking Soleimani did nothing but create more sympathy for the Iranian regime from its own people. Like, if you care about these people, and especially if you want them to reform their country or something, like, leave them alone. Stop giving the government excuses to blame it on external things, So I'm pretty much in agreement with you. I mean, I understand what Dave and Scott are saying from an ideological standpoint, but especially to defend Scott, like, whenever I hear him talk about this stuff, he does say that. He says, like, look, I am a political anarchist. I don't really believe in government, but when we're talking about like what Russia's doing or what China's doing, like, from a geopolitical perspective, we can't blame them at all. Like, the way the Chinese are upset about us, sailing warships through the Taiwan Strait. If China were sailing warships between Cuba and Florida, there's no way we would tolerate that. We would be absolutely furious.
We would not allow it at all. We wouldn't allow it at all.
Yeah. All right, man. Well, let's do plugs and get out of here. So where could people keep up with you and what you're doing?
The Convo Couch. You can see it. Hey, CONVOCOUCH. The Convo Couch on Rockfin, on YouTube, on Rumble. Same thing with our other show. It's not on YouTube. It's AM Wake Up every morning, Monday through Friday, 7 a.m. These are the chips that we were supposed to get. They came a week after Freedom Fest, so we couldn't give you. These were like little poker chips. They got Gomez on one side, and they got the AM Wake Up symbol on the other one. We were supposed to have them for Freedom Fest because it was Vegas and stuff. But AM Wake Up is Monday through Friday, 7 a.m. to 10 a.m. on Pacific Standard Time. Convo Couch Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at noonish. And you can always catch Fiorella on Rumble, and she's on RT on the news desk. She lives in Moscow now, and we will be in Cuba next year for those elections in March. Argentina at the end of the year. So we'll be out there following elections, ladies and gentlemen.
All right. Well, thanks for talking, man. We'll chat again soon. Anyone watching, if you're new, please subscribe to the channel, and I'll catch you on the next episode.